My name is Rabbi Finn and you are here for another Bereishit Bite from Bournemouth and Ulster United Synagogue. Every week I'm showing you a brand new recipe to celebrate that week's Torah portion. And this week, trust me, it's a good one. It's Parshat Vayetzei and therefore we are doing a Jacob's Ladder. You get it? Brilliant. If you don't worry, I'll explain in a moment. But for most of you who are wondering what's a Jacob's Ladder, well, that is another name for a rack of ribs, usually short ribs, but also finger ribs. And I'm going to show you an amazing, easy, beautiful, stunning, fantastic recipe to celebrate this week's Torah portion. But before I do, let me share with you a brief idea. This week's Parsha is Parshat Vayetzei. We started with Yaakov, Jacob, running away from his brother Esau. Why? Well, because last week Yaakov might have stolen the birthright that Esau believed was his, but actually Esau had sold to Yaakov for a bowl of lentil soup. Yaakov runs away, he gets tired, he sets up a row of stones around him, and he falls asleep and he has a dream. And in that dream, he dreams of a ladder with angels going up and angels going down. That dream has so much significance, especially Kabbalistic, mystical significance within Judaism, that there's not enough time actually in this video for me to share with you about it. The story continues where Yaakov he goes to a well. Sound familiar? Yes, well, because that's where you're going to meet a girl these days. You go to a well and he sees a bunch of shepherds standing around. He goes to the shepherds. Oi, why are you standing around? He says, well, the shepherds respond, well, there's a well here, but there's a massive rock and it takes all of us to move it. So we all gather around at the same time and we move the rock. Yaakov sees in the distance a beautiful girl who's going to turn out to be Rachel, the one who he wants to marry. He sees her coming, gets the hold of the rock, moves it on his own off the well, and then goes to Rachel and says, who are you? They meet, she goes back, takes him back to her father. Her father is Lavan, Yaakov's family, the brother of his mother, Rivka. Yaakov stays with Lavan for a while and he works for a while, and after a while Lavan says, Yaakov, you've been here for a long time, tell me what would you like? And Yaakov says, you know what, I really like your daughter Rachel and I think she likes me too. Can I marry her? And Lavan says, brilliant idea, wonderful, do you know what, you work 7 years and then you get to marry my daughter Rachel. So Yaakov works really hard for 7 years and gets to the wedding night, everything is going well. The next morning he wakes up, oh no, he's not married Rachel, Lavan's done a whole switcheroo and instead he's married Leah, the older sister. The next morning, obviously, Yaakov's living. I worked 7 years to marry Rachel, and this is Leah, not Rachel. Lavan says, don't worry, where we are, the older child has to get married before the younger child. You know what, I'll do you a deal. If you work another 7 years, then you get to marry Rachel, who you really love. Yaakov thinks, oh, you could but I really like Rachel, and I can't, hurt Leah, so I'll stay married to Leah, but I'll also work 7 years for Rachel. 7 days later is actually when the marriage happens, but, Yaakov then works for another 7 years for Rachel, and in this time we are told about Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah, all having children. Of course, we see the struggle of Rachel, who deals, like so many of the Jewish matriarchs, with infertility, with fertility problems. Let me share with you a short idea. Because as I mentioned, we have this really odd scene at the well. Yaakov comes and he sees all the shepherds gathered around. He says, what are you doing, wasting your time having a natter around a well? Feed your master's animals their water and be gone. And they say, we can't do it because there's this giant rock and it takes all of us to move it. And yet what happens when Yaakov sees Rachel? He picks up a rock on his own. He moves that rock. He literally moves mountains. And as I reflect on this, I think perhaps actually that rock was always movable by one individual. And yet the shepherds had created this fiction which they themselves believed that it would take a number of them to move this rock. And therefore, for how many years had they all been gathering around, none of them brave enough to move it on their own, all waiting for each other. And it took this outsider, Yaakov, with his new perspective to see actually this rock can be moved by an individual. And as I reflect on this, I think, how often do we put obstacles in our way? How often do we think something is too difficult and yet somebody else comes along and manages to do it? They said that nobody could ever do the 4-minute mile. And then, do you know what? Roger Bannister and a bunch of other people just came along and did the 4-minute mile. Sometimes we create barriers, we create obstacles in our mind. And actually it takes a different perspective, an outsider's perspective, to be able to overcome that. But it doesn't always require an outsider to come and do that, but us to take an outsider's perspective. When we are confronted with a challenge or a norm, let's not just accept it. Let's think, how can we do it better? How can we improve on it? what mountains can we move? Because actually it's sometimes easier to do things than we give ourselves credit for. So, your challenge this week is to try and find something you found difficult and give it another go. Try and approach the problem from a different angle, and you never know, you might be successful. To celebrate, as I said, this week's portion, we are making a Jacob's Ladder. I hope you do this recipe. I love it. It is stunning. It tastes amazing. And you know what? It is the easiest recipe I've shown you so far. Enjoy. So we are making a barbecued Jacob's Ladder in the oven, better known to some as a rack of short ribs or a rack of finger ribs. This is a super easy dish. Anybody can make it. You let the oven do all the hard work, and then at the end you baste it with a beautiful barbecue sauce, which I'm going to show you also how to make. So to start off, we need to make our rub. Grab a bowl. Into the bowl you want to put 1/4 cup of brown sugar. I know that might seem a lot, but you're going to need the sugar to help caramelize and flavour the beef. Into it now, I want to add a teaspoon of smoked paprika, followed by 2 tablespoons of normal paprika. All of this is going to be rubbed into the meat and it's going to give it the most amazing flavour. Once you've done that, get another tablespoon of cumin, or cumin, depending on how you like to say it, into the bowl. It doesn't matter if it's heaps, tablespoons, the more the merrier in my opinion. You want to add in a tablespoon of onion powder, available in all good kosher shops, and also a tablespoon of garlic granules or garlic powder, preferably garlic powder, but I'm using garlic granules here. Again, available in all good kosher stores. The last couple of ingredients we're going to add is this depends on how spicy you like things. I'm not a huge fan of massive spice, so I'm going to use a teaspoon of chili powder. If you want more, add a little bit more. And a good grind of salt. Remembering though that kosher meat is already salted, so you don't need to go OTT. And then a really good grind though of pepper. So, and that is it. To recap, in here I've got 1/4 cup of brown sugar, a teaspoon of smoked paprika, 2 tablespoons of normal paprika, a tablespoon of onion powder, a tablespoon of cumin, a tablespoon of ginger, a bit of chili powder, a bit of salt and a bit of pepper. Give it all a really, really good mix and put it to one side. Grab your meat. So, I've got here 1.5 kilos of short ribs on a rack of short ribs. This is what it looks like. As I say, you can use finger ribs as well. Really important though, the back side of the ribs contains a membrane. You want to try and get as much of that membrane off as possible. As you can see, I've already done quite a lot of the work. It does take a bit of time. Ideally, get the butcher to do it for you. You want as much off as possible so that it will cook beautifully. This is as much as I'm able to get off for the moment. Now, you also want 2 bits of silver foil because we're going to double wrap this. Get your meat, put it onto a tray with silver foil. Grab your rub and really, as simple as rub it in to the meat. It does what it says on the tin. So, give it a really good sprinkle on the top. Turn it over. A really good sprinkle on the bottom. And use your hands to massage it in as much as possible to the rack of ribs. It might look like a lot of rub is on here, but it all adds to the beautiful flavour. Once you're satisfied that you're going to get no more of the rub in, turn it so that it is bone side down. Get as much on top as possible and wrap it up in the 2 levels of silver foil. I am wrapping each parcel individually so that it is really, really well wrapped. Put it on a tray in case it's going to leak, and also make it much easier to take it in and out of the oven. Put it into your oven for 3.5 to 4 hours at 130 degrees Celsius. After 3.5 hours or 4 hours, open it up, test it with a fork. You want the meat to be super soft. It may take 5 hours, it may even take 6 hours, depending on how much meat and how much fat there is on your rack of ribs. But trust me, it is going to taste amazing. I will see you in 3.5, 4 hours, maybe even 5 hours time. I will not know until I take it out to test it. So my ribs have been in the oven for 4.5 hours. I decided to give them a little bit longer than normal because it is such a big bit of meat. Let's open the first package. Let's open the second package. This looks absolutely incredible. Whew. Smells amazing. In fact, let me just show you what it's looking like at the moment. Don't know if you can see that. Beautiful meat. Beautiful liquor. Now, to make this extra special, I'm going to actually put on a second barbecue sauce. The way how you make this barbecue sauce is as follows. 2 tablespoons of tomato ketchup. Get some hoisin sauce. A tablespoon of hoisin. Half a teaspoon of garlic granules. Half a teaspoon of chili flakes. And I would say a good tablespoon of brown sugar. Now, obviously, this sauce is totally optional. If you want to leave this as like this, turn the oven up to 200 degrees Celsius and just let it baste and form a beautiful crust. I just like to add another sauce just to add something a little bit more. So mix it all together. And just spread over the top of your ribs. This is going to caramelize. It's going to help give the skin a beautiful, crunchy, sticky crust and just adds another level of flavour. Once I've done that, I like to get some of the sauce that is surrounding this meat and just use this to baste further the ribs. This looks incredible. I turned the oven up to 200 degrees Celsius and I'm going to pop it back in for about 15 minutes so it starts to get all caramelized on top. So, this is what it looks like at the moment. Now back in the oven. I'll see you in 15 minutes time for the final version. I took my ribs out and they've now been resting for about 10 to 15 minutes so that the juices can spread throughout the meat. I'm ready to cut it. I've got some garlic mash ready to serve with it. This looks absolutely incredible. It smells amazing. Let's give this a go. I think I'm only going to go for one rib here because it's so big. Let's give this a cut. Oh, wow. That is so soft. Amazing. It is literally falling off the bone. Let me show you this. There you've got it. Jacob's Ladder, garlic mash. What more could you want to celebrate this week's Parsha? I'm going to go enjoy this. Shabbat Shalom.